Welcome, everyone. If you're watching this, we're a little bit into our August Microsolidarity Network call. I'm just opening up the floor to three of us here who are at the US Microsolidarity Summer Camp, which just finished maybe just a couple of weeks ago. So that's Ewan, Stephen, and Shane. And we're going to hear from them a bit, and then we're going to open up the floor for some questions and noodle around on that. And then we'll also have a chat about and hear some voices about how it went at the Borderland Burn Festival in Sweden, where Sarah and I were, and we were part of a Microsolidarity-ish camp, and we could share some of our learnings there. I'm particularly curious to hear about, what did we all grow into, or what were our growth edges there, particularly in relation to leadership, hospitality, and microsolidarity. So yeah, Ewan, Stephen, and Shane, you want to take the floor?
Sure, I can say a little bit. I think it went really well. I think we did a good job kind of being silly and joyful together, and that really felt awesome. Even and there's like people that we knew, people that we didn't know, people that we sort of knew through other people, and it was a good mix of people. And I think part of the edge was like Sarah did basically all the work, like preparing the summer camp and then facilitating and making a plan for everything. So we had like a plan for what was going to happen in the first 2 days and opening on the third day, and she had the menu set up in advance, and so I think that was awesome to see how she did that. And then I don't know, it was nice to just not stress out about it, to just feel like it's gonna be fine, and to sort of not like, I felt like I was just holding space to not be stressed out, and then other people are not going to be stressed out and are going to be comfortable too, because I was doing okay and other people are going to do okay. Instead of, because I've been in other gatherings where like if the organizer is stressed out, then other people get stressed out, like contact stress from the organizer. So I just wanted people not to get contact stress from us, and trust that even though people have different needs, they're going to figure it out. And I think that's, yeah. The main thing was there was a lot of joy, and like people felt comfortable to be as weird as they wanted to be, as different as they wanted to be, and felt welcome there, and they were exploring their edges of being different and weird and funny and silly. And at least that's my perspective. Everybody's gonna have a different perspective, so I'll let Stephen and Shane say how they felt.
Something that brings up for me, one was the space holding. There were times in the morning when there was a check-in, so it was like, how's everyone doing, 1 through 5, and you could see who's having a good time and who had not as good a time, and is a really good way of uh having a group consciousness of, again, how people were doing. And then if people had like 4s or 3s or 2s, it's like there's a chance to inquire into that. That actually created the space for me to talk about the difficulty of trying to do a micro solidarity camp with a pretty young a young toddler. And so it created some space for me, and then it allowed me to lean into an edge of like, well, shoot, like my first day was a 3, and it was so hard to set up. And he's my son's pretty high contact, high engagement, but it allowed me to talk about my son, talk about how to relate to him and in terms of like maybe extending like my parenting field, or like how do we relate to boundaries. I'd never done that with kind of a group of mostly unfamiliar faces. There are some familiar faces which really helped a lot, but there are a lot of people I didn't know. So there was some opening and vulnerability and saying like, and just presenting myself like, I don't know how to relate to this space. And I think I can kind of attach that moment to, there's an opening and a vulnerability there, which sort of in the end led to me feeling just a lot more comfortable about my own parenting. Uh, I'd say like I'm not a non-coercive parent. Like there are times when you need to really put down limits, and that can be a hard thing to do in spaces when people are actually trying to like maybe do the opposite in terms of like their adult, their development. But my son needs boundaries and boundaries and limits, and I was realizing uh, that I was masking that. I had shame around that, and by the end, I was much more comfortable in setting a limit and enforcing it, and uh, so that was a pretty big growth edge for me. It's like I've developed this form of parenting, or found a form of parenting which works for me and my kid, and I know it feels a little bit out of place or something like that, but I stand by it, and I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of my son, and I think that started to come out at the end after like a fair lot of kind of me working through um, not doing that and feeling pretty stressed because a kid doesn't have limits. You're kind of just maybe trying to chase them all the time, and that can really run you out. So uh, that was a good opening. It was a very good opening for me.
Thanks, Stephen. Beautiful to hear. Let's just take a couple more minutes to also hear from Shane before we open it up, because it's so rich hearing each of your different perspectives.
Alex, who just joined, was also at summer camp.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take. So I'm changing I realized 5 minutes was way too short to get the richness. Let's take a couple minutes for Shane and a couple minutes for Alex. So 4 minutes. Yeah.
Hi. Well, good morning, Ewan, Stephen, and Alex. It's good to see you. Yeah, this is great. This is my first experience of this is my first Microsolidarity summer camp, my first Meso event, and also the first, it's weird to say, but like my first sort of like very small festival or campy event. And it was really, really good. The people there were great. There were a couple dozen folks. The events were a lot of fun. And again, because this is my first thing, I don't know how much of this is built into the format and how much of it is something that was put on by Elkenmist in the way that they did this. But there was a really nice balance between the open spaces and a pretty wide diversity of what people chose to do with them, from like physically engaging acts to like sort of like emotionally expressive acts. There were a couple of different anger expression sessions that I was a part of one of them, and those both seemed to do a lot for the people who did them. And there was a nice balance between that, just people who were attending, choosing to host these things, and the events that the people running the space chose to put on officially. So probably the most interesting one was the beaver dam building session, where we went down to the creek and built a beaver dam to practically keep water, to practically sort of like stop the flow of water and change the environment, and do good things and sort of imitate what beavers used to do in much larger quantities, and still do there in some cases. There are beavers on the creek where Elkenmist is set. So anyway, it was like a fun activity and something that effectively everybody in the group was a part of. That was great. There were like a handful of different official events. It was just a beautiful event. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, for me personally, going into these kinds of things, I think like a lot of people, but in my own weird way, a little bit cautious of groups of strangers. And so I'm like sort of on the introverted side. I will keep to myself for the most part. And I felt like it's weird because the group of people there, as far as groups of people go, were probably the most cozy kinds of people to start to feel like, okay, I can feel chill with these people. I can hang out in the space. I can get to know people. People were, sort of gently initiating conversations. And then I had good conversations with a few people specifically, like Laura. Alex was very, I don't know what the word to use is, not generous, because that feels like it was a one-sided thing, but was very kind in conversations, and we just got into a great conversation about things associated with the space. And again, I feel like it's the quality of the people and the qualities that the people have as they attend these things really matters. And I feel like Ewan, I hadn't thought about what you were saying before you said it, but I feel like the people who were running this event were really quite calm and settled in the way that they ran it with the crew there at Elkenmist. And that did do a lot, looking back, for the tenor of the space and how people felt in it. Yeah, it was a really, really good experience. So that was my take.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Shane. It's really lovely to hear that too. And Alex just said that they are in transit, so they'll just listen and don't have audio, so might just watch the recording. So yeah, I invite Alex, if you can hear us, feel free to share something in the chat if you want. But yeah, let's open it up to some questions from everyone. Yeah, what are we curious about hearing more of from what you've heard? Feel free to unmute yourself, or if you want to just type something in the chat, you can do that there. Oh, great, Alex can hear us again. Oops. There you go.
I have a question around weirdness and diversity. Ewan, you said the space really invited people to, come along in all their weirdness. And I wondered, what was it about how it was like the container or the practices that enable space for people to like bring their own brand of weird? And were there any like tensions you noticed about that at points, or any particular like magics that happened through that the coming together of the weirdness and the diversity? And it's a question for anybody who was there as well.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of a quote from somebody who came and said, like, oh, like, I felt like finally I could be as weird as I am here, as I really am, and I didn't have to hide parts of myself. So, but I'm not sure if that's true. That was true for everybody. There's, I think part of it, is we are pretty silly and weird ourselves, the people who live there, and then we allow ourselves to do that, and we're kind of self-deprecating and just like we kind of model that. I think that makes it. I think that's part of it, and I think that's the main thing. And also, we kind of pay attention to also people and don't put pressure on everybody to have the same experience. So because there's people who chose to do their own thing, and that was also great, and that we kind of knew some people would want to do different things, and we didn't put any pressure on them to be more part, like to come to all the big group things. So I think that's part of it as well, that it's okay to have different experiences, and we modeled it in some way, or other people modeled it for us. Yeah.
I can also just say, this kind of hits on the weirdness thing, but it's more like, Ewan, I was there when the person said, and I don't know, they're not here, so I don't want to name names or call somebody out there, but I remember who said what you were talking about. I remember on the drive back too, because you gave me a ride back to Portland. It was a group of us in a car, and one of the people who was in the car, this is less weird, but more expressiveness, which I feel can be the same thing. If you're feeling like you're expressing more sides of yourself, then that tends to make you weirder, in a very good way. And I remember somebody in the car said that they felt like they were a very different person at this, and that they felt like they were more fully themselves than I think they said than they ever had been before, which is really cool. So it feels like, a couple of people, I remember a couple of people saying this, and for everybody who's saying this, I imagine that there are some more who aren't saying it, but who are kind of feeling like they're leaning into that space. Anyway, my cat is meowing, so I'm going to mute myself, but
Also, we had a 8-foot truck bed full of oatmeal. Then people jumped in it and had a oatmeal bath, oatmeal fight. So that did that did a lot on the last day. That did a lot to let people decide how they wanted to engage and how weird they wanted to be. And some people said, I think Steven said it was a peak experience.
Yeah, definitely. Bucket item I didn't know I had. Peak experience, like far reaches of qualia you could experience. It's like, this is very unusual. It felt like we were in a dream, and that was very magical. Lots of, yeah, just, you know, chocolate and cranberries and oatmeal. So it wasn't just oatmeal, but, you know, some,
Yeah.
you don't want just, you don't want plain oatmeal, right? You got to have a
Yeah.
couple extra things. Then at one point, the tub of oatmeal got, like, there's a big tub, got dumped out. So there's even more oatmeal, and people ended up inside the tub. And then, you know, we'd knock on the tub and like throw oatmeal on the side of the tub, and people would be like, "Whoa, what is going on? What were you doing out there?" So it was just it was beautiful. It was iconic. I highly recommend a collective oatmeal jacuzzi in the back of a truck if you can swing it.
And then Alex and myself were spraying them with water guns, with squirt guns. So it was a complete experience. It was a blast. It was such a trip. And the oatmeal thing, by the way, was hilarious and silly and fun. But it also actually seemed to be pretty good for people, like physically, in terms of not just, of course, going through the experience and the felt sense and a bunch of stuff going on, but literally for the skin, the quality of their skin. I remember hearing about that from people. So anyway, just like commenting on the experience there.
I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the after that experience. Like, how do you perceive the if there was any shift that you were able to perceive in terms of intimacy, and especially in the relationships among people, and how did that experience inform new layers of conversation or relationality?
I'm not sure, because it was on Saturday and people left on Sunday, but yeah, I don't know that I've tracked that specifically. It's kind of a culmination of the whole sort of event in some way. People did a lot of dancing that evening. We had somebody who Rich introduced me to like 2 weeks before the event, who came and set up like a whole DJ system with like a fog machine and lasers and 2 projectors and in the yard. So there's a lot of dancing, and I think probably there's more playfulness in the dancing after Denzel called it a transpersonal oatmeal, because it was a sort of a blurring of boundaries between bodies in the oatmeal. There's sort of a collective being, like Rich likes to talk about collective beings that arise out of groups of people.
I mean, besides, you know, I spent more time with Shane, and I got closer to Shane. I think I got closer to Sarah and Ewan too, in little bits and pieces. I feel like there's like so I live an hour and a half away from Elkenmist, and I've been there like several times, and it feels like just enough. It's like every time. Yeah, I don't know. I feel less like strangers, more like part of an extended community of Elkenmist or something like that. So that feels very cool. And then there were a lot of people I met for the first time. I think some new relationships are coming out of that. And I also want to say that I think my own experience, like my own relation to like the group, you know, group fields. So it's like, oh, here's like a group of like relative strangers that are friendly. Like I feel like I've gotten a new, more open bias. Like I feel like I can just, you know, drop my defenses a little bit more, a little bit sooner. in the future in relation to those kinds of circumstances again.
We got
Yeah,
about.
same thing.
Oh, you go ahead. Oh, actually,
yeah.
I was
Go
just
for
to
it.
say in terms of timing, I think if we take about 5 more minutes here, and then we have time for also the other topic, just as a collective awareness. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty much echoing what Stephen said. Yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing that I was thinking. Yeah, after leaving it, there's this feeling of, yeah, renewed openness, especially with people that you don't know. I feel like when you're in a group of people and you get to know them fairly well, like I've done here in Portland over the last couple of years, you start to feel open in that group. But I feel like there's a whole other sort of like level of, I don't know, global openness or something, just in general in the world, disregarding levels of intimacy that you've built up with people, levels of mutually knowing people and friendship, sort of in that traditional way. There's a sense of like, okay, trusting other people in the world in a good faith way. And this event, and I think events like this, are really good for that sense and feeling at home in the world and in yourself wherever you are. And I hadn't thought about it sort of consciously until having this conversation. But I do notice a change looking back after leaving the event, and yeah, interacting with people in general, and even interacting with friends back here in Portland. So that has been very nice.
I just want to clarify a little bit where I was coming from also, because I've been very curious about physical contact in adult like new friendships in adult relationships. Like, when we grow up, we have this natural way of being with our friends, like till adolescence. And then now when you get to become friends with an adult, it takes a longer, at least that is my experience, into getting into that intimacy of like hugging or a context. So I was like, watching the pictures of the oatmeal, I was like, what? Like already there, like 3 days ago you were an extension. So I was like really like curious in that sense. I have one more question, but I don't know the timing, and it's about the relationship to the land, because I know there was an intention in the designing of the event, and also because I'm really curious about Elkenmist as a place where it's becoming a place where the microsolidarity community can return to, and differentiating it from the other events that we've been running through the years, which we rent a place and then you never come back to it. So I'm curious about like this continuity and what the land had provide for people, and how you see also the impact, or maybe we'll see, I don't know if you have already, in the land from the having the event there or something, whatever you want to say.
I mean, it feels awesome to have people come back and develop relationships with the land. And there's I mean, we made a beaver dam. That was part of we'll see how the beaver dam, like if the beavers adopt the beaver dam, then and like, oh, that's great. And also Taras, who was there, he made like a improvised bridge over the creek, and like made a whole area they call Beaver Plaza, where there's like more room to do stuff later. So there's definitely an impact. And then the chickens got to eat a lot of oatmeal. The spot where you spill the oatmeal is gonna get a lot of good compost. But I mean, that's definitely a dream for me to have, like, develop over time relationships where people keep coming back and feel like they're part of something and build things together. So since we're going to talk about Burning Man, it's more like Burning Man, or like something where you build things and you don't have to burn them. You just like keep coming back and build. But Laura, I want to hear from Laura.
Hello, hold on. Let's see how I can lower hand. I think this is kind of the most area of curiosity for me in general about doing this kind of thing. I've been to a lot of events over time, and it's led me to, in my work, mostly be focused on the kind of in-between events space and how do we build is the wrong word, cultivate relationality in those in-between areas. You know, because we can't always be together, but also what I've noticed is that I've been to so many events where everyone's like, oh my gosh, we've met our new best friends, and then never talk to them again. Or like, you know, maybe see them at another event and be like, oh, it's great to see you. But that's not really the same thing as well, solidarity. Solidarity is interdependent, right? And so there's something about that that feels interesting. Like how do we use events not so much as like the thing that where people get together, but more like a way of cementing relationships that are continuing to coalesce in between those times. And I think the thing with Elkenmist would be really interesting. I was talking to Iwan about it, about having a commitment to go maybe like monthly with a small group of people who would then be seeing the land throughout the seasons and actually like participating in different parts of stewarding the land in a different way than you can when you're just sort of there like hanging out and having it be a service for you.
Beautiful.
I would be down to that. I just wanted to come in and say that I would be down to do that.
Exciting. That's maybe a nice moment to start. Like, there's so much more I'd love to hear about, and I hope that more people would interview Iwan and Stephen and Shane and Alex, like if you've got more curiosity, because there could be a lot of gold still harvested from this. And in fact, I hear that on the 2nd of August tomorrow there might be a reflection call. And if you guys feel up for recording that, it would be so great to hear your learnings. But something about this, hearing what's going on here and what Julia wrote in the chat just here, it's like hearing these meta reflections. She knows there's some kind of shared experiences after a Microsolidarity summer camp or a gathering with that intentionality. And I find that very fascinating because often there's a question like, what is microsolidarity? And I think it becomes clearer and clearer every time we gather of what's this sort of commonality after all these gatherings. And I'm hearing a lot of that, and like a wish for continuity, finding a depth of connection, capacity to just really be oneself and show up in a way that's both playful and also helpful and serious and deep. It's super valuable hearing all of these reflections. And something that touched me from what you just said at the end around what Alex and Shane just mentioned about continuity is the value of like crewing. And I think, Sarah, we've spoken about Sarah, and that's Sarah Bajor from the US, but Sarah, who's here, she's actually one of the co-hosts of and co-facilitators of the summer camp in Europe coming up soon. We've talked a lot about the value of crewing after an event, that you can keep a crew from the group, like where that energy can still be alive, or maybe you connect it to a certain intention of a mission that you've discovered during the week of gathering in person. And I find that's a very unique aspect of our network, where we gather in person as much as we can, maybe at least on a yearly basis, based on which continent we're in, and then continue that with crewing either locally, regionally where we live, or online. So it's really beautiful to hear there's like a wish for continuing in a smaller group, or people who are committed to continuing something of what we learned. Yeah. Okay. Ivan says, I was really relieved nobody asked what microsolidarity was at summer camp. I think Sarah Bajor would echo that as well at the beginning. She's like, what if people ask that? How do you define it? An ongoing mission or challenge. Cool. How do we all feel about transitioning to the topic around the Borderland camp? Everyone ready for that? Yeah? Cool. I find it a bit helpful just to transition the chapter, take a deep breath, and just like digest what's all been said. And maybe just check that you're comfortable. If you need a little break from the screen for your dear little eyeballs, feel free to look into the distance. And even if you want to get up and stretch, maybe that's a nice moment as well to look after our bodies while being on the computer. Yeah. So, Sarah, it was you and me at Borderland, as well as 23 other people in our camp. I wonder, would you like to do the honors of sharing a bit about, maybe not everyone's familiar with the concept of a burn, or just explaining a bit about the context we were in and the aspects of microsolidarity that were intended to be there. And then we can talk about what we learned, our growth edges. Yeah.
How do you feel if I throw that opening back to you? Are you up for it's kind of setting the scene?
Yeah, I can also do that. Yeah. Cool. Let me see. So Borderland is a regional burn in Sweden. So a burn is a kind of has, I was curious about it, has some overlaps with microsolidarity in terms of like creating different rules of, and like different experimenting different ways of relating. It's entirely based on gifting. And so it's very much about reciprocity. I felt like there was a sense of how can I contribute to the whole by giving something. There was also many people there. Some people free camp, but others choose to join as a camp. And this year, our friend Brooks, who I got to know just through this, he had this idea, having been at the Borderland for a long time, recognized it's quite hard to create a sense of belonging and groundedness in a group of 5,000 people. So but yet there was also a scale of like camps being around anywhere between 10 and 30 or 40 people, but there was something missing in the scale in between, which actually makes me curious about, is there a scale between crew and congregation? And if so, what does that look like, and what can it offer that a crew or a congregation misses out on? So he invited sort of a town square idea in the festival, where he invited 12 different camps to form around a central hexagon. So it was called the Hex, because hexagons are the bestigons, obviously. So he had like 12 camps of us, and we all saw different sizes, but the one rule for joining the Hex was that you had a public-facing offering. So Nati spent a lot of time sewing together a giant blanket fort, and Rich and Jonas were constructing that. And we had our camp behind that with our kitchen and our living, our tents, and we had some bell tents as a living room communal space. So it was a very interesting experiment to see, okay, how do we create belonging and cohesion within our camp, but also how does that happen on a more town square type scale, where there were maybe 400 or 500 of us, and then how does that support belonging and a bit of groundedness within a wider festival context? Maybe some further important background information was it started off as the idea of, let's create a microsolidarity camp, because we thought, what better way to practice microsolidarity than going to a festival together and forming a camp for a week? And like, how are we going to do that? And especially with within this idea of creating belonging and connectedness in a sort of village scale. I think there were some challenges along the way, which is that the idea of microsolidarity got a bit watered down because quite a few people got invited in who were not in the network or familiar with it. Still were community builders, but didn't have the same kind of attention to the same kind of details or on the same kind of levels. There was a few like power struggles going on, I would say, or differences in leadership. And it ended up being quite, on a personal level, I had a really meaningful transformational time with the peak experience of getting married, which is fantastic. And that really drew the camp together, I think. It was like a collective focus on that day. But for the rest of the time, I found it quite challenging to, at the same time, within this festival context where everyone's off on their own adventure and underslept and kind of following spontaneity, and there's a timelessness, it was hard to find, like, to create a solid group structure, and tensions weren't addressed very easily. And I think there could have been ways in which like having little pods within our crew even would have helped. But yeah, I'm going to just pause there and pass that over to you, Sarah, if that's all right with you. Do you feel like you take the baton from there?
Yes, beautifully laid out how the wider context, what the wider context is, and then the Hex and our camp. And yeah, a few reflections. So yeah, I think we've talked quite a lot in our like debriefing about this topic of source and how Originally there was one person like anchoring this idea of like this is going to be a micro-solidarity camp, and then at some point they decided to move actually to a different camp, and what it meant was that the anchoring of micro-solidarity was never fully in place, and then indeed we had people with different backgrounds and skills and experience coming in. So we had people who were like really into the burner scene, and we had people from Microsolidarity and from other communities, and then some of us had like never been to a burn before, or never been to the Swedish burn before, or that weren't familiar with Microsolidarity. So it meant that it was I guess in some ways there wasn't like the source that really anchored it, or like clear leadership at points, which led to a bit of a kind of amorphous container. That also, I think we also had these really like beautiful camp moments, of course, the wedding and this huge storm before the wedding where we were all running around with huge containers trying to stop the camp getting completely flooded, and like these moments of togetherness. But I think a learning for me around the importances of practices that build connection, like pods and like group check-ins, is that at points I felt quite a lot of pressure with different people wishing for emotional support and care, and a feeling like a familiar pattern of like, oh, I have to do this by myself, or there's no one else but me. And then towards the end of the camp, with various debriefing processes, it became clear that other people in the camp were really wishing for like a greater degree of connectivity and closeness, and like this hand movement that was talked about in the US summer camp, like how are you on a scale of 1 to 5, like these kind of practices that let each other know like, hey, where are we at, and who might be wanting support and who might have capacity to give support. So I'm just coming away really seeing the importance of kind of building that connective tissue in the group at the small scale for the like larger group, and would definitely be bringing that in future Borderland or burn camps.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's great, Sarah. Shall we open it up for questions or curiosities? In particular, like, if there's an event that you're organizing or in your leadership position, is there something that you're also wondering about yourself that might relate? Yeah.
How big was the event? How many people were more or less there?
I think the total was about 5,000. No more than that, but between 4,000 and 5,000. Yeah. Yeah. Victoria.
Yeah. So I don't know. I find this interesting to compare and contrast the experiences of folks that the microsolidarity versus burn, and the like the bit that I'm curious about is like, okay, you got at the burn, it sounds like there wasn't this sort of same shared context and like all of the culture that's already sort of set as a foundation. And it made me curious, like, oh, like what I think that in ways microsolidarity folks are sort of clearer about like belonging needs and social needs, and like have that as the foundation. So one of the moves that I learned from a previous microsolidarity practice group was, turning needs into invitations, and it made me curious, like what kind of invitations might be foundational to sort of like help to create that baseline, in circumstances where we're going to be around like a group of people that don't share this sort of context, like something just easy and skillful to offer. It made me curious about that kind of a question.
Yeah, I love that. I think that I was very curious. I almost went to Borderland as a bit of a researcher of like, what happens here? And like, what can microsolidarity learn from a burn? And I think, and what can burns learn from microsolidarity? Like, what could we contribute? I think that's where I was a bit disappointed because I felt it was so unfamiliar to me. And I was quite like, it's such an overwhelming place that I didn't have much capacity to bring my gifts and skills. So it was just more like on a, whoa, for the first few days, especially, which are kind of the core moments of setting a vibe and a cultural container, like right from the beginning. So I was a bit knocked out, but I did recognize, I think, yeah, like the burn has like something really powerful about it is they have quite some clear rules, and like they call them principles, like immediacy, like acting, if you have an idea, like act it out now, and which creates a very creative environment. Gifting, which is like going like decommodifying support and offerings, just generally like decommodification. And at the same time, there wasn't so much that I think there was still a sense of like belonging as a skill was not such a thing. And it's a bit like fend for yourself. Like one of their principles is like self-reliance and like radical self-expression, self-reliance. Like you need something, you ask for it. And I think there's something about when, for example, like if someone feels very at home, that's very good. Like if a friend's come over 10 times to my house and I say, make yourself at home, take what you need, give, like leave what you want to, like it's easy because they know the way around. But if it's the first time they visit and I say make yourself at home, they don't know where the teacups are. I need a bit more introduction. I missed a bit of that, of like people being like, oh, you're new, let me show you around, let me introduce you to people I know. Whereas hearing a lot of people saying, oh, I've been to Burns for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, and these are my people here, and I never met any of those people. I don't know who they were. There wasn't much sense of let me weave you in. And I think that kind of culture that we have in the network is beautiful for me. I just feel like I notice when people are new in a group, like seeing each other be like, oh, so who are you? And oh, you're going to link up with this person. Yeah. Sarah, you have your hand up. Maybe you wanted to add something to that as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in with something that I witnessed particularly Rich and Nati doing as an offer from our camp. And so, as Jocelyn mentioned, we had this really amazing fort blanket, which had some mattresses inside and some like fluffy blankets and pillows. And one thing that I think people are really seeking at some point in the burn or various points is like respite, care, coziness, belonging. And I think Rich and Nati particularly like anchored that space as your like to people outside our camp, to other people. They're like, yeah, this is a space that you're welcome. You can come in here and you can feel well received, and you can feel at ease, and you can feel at home. And I think I heard Rich saying as well, after inviting some people in and then he was leaving, you're just so welcome to be in this space, and the only request is that you make other people feel welcome and at ease when they come in. And yeah, I think that's something really like clear and beautiful that Microsolidarity can offer Borderland and the Burns. And I feel excited by the amount of learning that we've got from this one time, of if we want to do it again at some point. I think we can really bring some microsolidarity gifts to the burn community.
Any other questions or comments? Thoughts?
guess I'm sort of curious about how maybe what the future could hold in terms of like a synthesis of, I don't know, burner, a synthesis of multiple cultures. I think that's sort of an interesting question. It's not very defined what I'm asking, but it's sort of like, what, and it sounded also like this was like the first encounter for like, multiple micro solidarity people in burner culture, for example. But I hope I've maybe given you enough to work with, but it's sort of like what there's like a field of potential there or unknown, and what might you see like coming out of that?
Like what could the future hold with further synthesis of those two worlds? Yeah. It's really interesting because I think like within this pluralistic context, or like I think in microsolidarity, it's for me like the least practice based. It's the least like the paradigm that I've come across. It's the least, as far as I know, like this is the practice we do. It's not about this is what we do and this is what we do. Like everyone brings in their own flavor. It's more of a posture of welcoming and hospitality. And yet I think there is something of like that like the more it comes into contact with different cultural contexts, I think the more it can become enriched and grow. And I think that's a great question around how does this become relevant to different contexts, like also different cultural contexts. I think something that could be synergistic from the burn into the microsolidarity network could be this sense of really amplifying the sense of immediacy and creativity. And I'm already curious, like wondering to myself, at summer camp at the end of August, what kind of offering or space could I create that would be a playful and creative space for expression that brings us together, that creates a sense of, oh wow, this is also possible. Because that was like a sort of a like why not energy, and let's see what happens if energy. Yeah, I think that could be quite an exciting introduction, and it's very, I feel like, very reflected with the oatmeal, the interpersonal oatmealing. It's like exactly that kind of energy, like a sort of playfulness that brings you together in a way that's like not directly having a clear like deep point to it, but it's a vector within which we play and have a relational experience together, and brings us more into contact without necessarily being from the head or the mind or with concepts, but just in a sense of, hey, remember we can also play. Yeah.
I think just to add on that, I think like, so when I was at the summer camp last year, there was definitely like lots of space for play and party and silliness. But yeah, there was something really pleasurable about bringing like some microsolidarity vibes to the burn, and then being also in this like party spirit amongst other people from the microsolidarity network. So having that bit of like wild child hair down moment with members of the network. So yeah, I enjoyed how the burn space facilitated that. And just on a separate point, I am coming away with, I'm not sure it's disappointment, but it's a bit of a question of like, hey, was that experience just a week? Was that a week-long party? In which case it was great, but was it also something else? And like, what have I learned from this, and what can we learn from this? And I'm not quite sure what the future holds on this question, but I I would love to engage in burn spaces as more like really engaging spaces for learning, and yeah, learning about community building. And I think I'm curious for future opportunities to think about what is that like learning intersection, like what are the opportunities of when you bring together microsolidarity and a burn to like really explore some individual and collective learning edges.
Mm-hmm. Are there any more burning questions to be, no pun intended? Or comments? Yeah. If not, I imagine going into a bit of a closing round. All right, and some announcements. Kevin?
I want to echo your desire for research into how to cohere a community and keep it thriving and flourishing, and people coming back and being energetic and thriving, basically, when there's so much going on in the outside of the congregation. So yeah, I think that's a brilliant question. I haven't come up with an answer to that either, but I'm deeply curious about it. So thank you for exploring that with us.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, it just highlights that thing from what you just said, highlights that we had the first conversation around like, how do we generate belonging from nothing, like create an event that creates belonging. And this is like, the burn was like, how do we create belonging within an existing group that's already like 12 years into its growth, and maybe would enjoy that essence a bit more. Yeah, it's all really good research questions. Yeah.
Well, and one thing that comes to mind for me with this is, between burns, I know, you have camps who will attend the burns, and there's often quite a bit of preparation for making the burn a really good experience and having something that you're bringing to it, which is itself like a kind of like community building and sustaining exercise. And on the other hand, again, maybe this is a little bit overly intellectual on my part, but there's something about contrasting, and you already said this earlier, but contrasting the come-froms with these different kind of, in some ways, oppositional groups, but they can totally be unified and almost like two sides of the same thing. But the burn seems very individualistic and self-reliant, and like, what is your experience going to be? And that part of the way that becomes a social thing is through the gift giving and through having these spontaneous interactions by choosing to be a certain way or choosing to do a certain thing with other people in the setting. And on the other hand, there's the sort of microsolidarity approach, as far as I can tell, of like creating belonging within a group of people de novo, like creating it sort of from scratch, and how to do that effectively in a way that feels genuine for people. So on the one hand, there's sort of like this convivial, like homeliness or something, feeling at ease within a group of people. And then on the other hand, there's this very expressive, individually expressive thing with the burns. And yeah, those seem kind of contrasting, but it feels like there's something in between those two, or the unification of those, that is really beautiful. Like being fully expressive and creative and playful in a group where it's not like the group is kind of coming to stasis over time, but different people are doing different things in it in a way that's creating something larger than the sum of its parts. And then on the other hand, with you going to the burn, trying to give people a sense of belonging, especially if they're new to it, and kind of bringing them in and making them feel more at home in it. Like those seem quite useful and interlocking. And yeah, again, I haven't done a burn, so this is all just from hearing about it and things I've heard before, but those make sense to me. And there does seem to be something fruitful out of the combination of those two approaches.
Yeah, completely resonate with everything you say, Shane. Yeah, thank you. Kevin?
Something that Shane said that came up for me was like the art project crews. People want to belong to a community, but they also want to feel like the community belongs to them. They've had a hand. They've had, it's co-created.
Yeah, in that regards, I'm really, I think there is something about the upcoming summer camp in the AU that brings a little bit of that, or at least that's my sense of it. In terms of, it's a place where already there is art making within nature, and like, yeah, I think that's going to be very different from last year. I don't know. In its inviting people to do things together and be creative, and yeah.
Yes, more research. Exactly. I'm really excited about that, and yeah, different venues create different opportunities as well. So this one will be in a beautiful place called Kunst in der Natur, art and nature. So it's actually really held as an opportunity to be connected with nature through art. So itself is going to be like, is it like environment or space as the other facilitator in the room. So yeah, maybe we got 10 minutes left until the end of the call time. Maybe that's a nice little segue. I did want to create some space for any announcements that are in the space. Like maybe Sarah, you want to speak to summer camp, any details around that? And Julia, I know you maybe shout out about the newsletter and any other. I heard, yeah, Shane and Alex are going to host something in Elkenmist, just like do a little elevator pitch, and then we'll do a brief checkout. Sarah, you want to go first?
Yeah, great. Thanks. Yes, so in exactly 4 weeks' time, the Microsolidarity Network will be coming together at Kunst in der Natur, Art in Nature, a really beautiful camp spot 1.5 hours outside of Vienna, where we'll spend some of us a long weekend and some of us a full week hanging out, having open space agenda, seeing what wants to emerge, and yeah, also inspired by what's been happening at Elkenmist. We also have this exploration about embeddedness and sense of place and feeling at home. So yeah, we're being invited in by the space to create art from natural materials and do some kind of shared project and go hiking on a nearby art trail. And yeah, I'm just getting really, really excited about it. There's a hosting crew of 4 of us, myself, Miriam, Jesse and Alex, and we're being supported closely by Jocelyn and Jonas, who were some of the hosts for last year, and then also by Rich as well. So yeah, I will drop the link to the Microsolidarity webpage and to find out more about the summer camp in the chat. And we also have staggered ticket prices and a scholarship scheme as well that you can apply for. And yeah, it would just be awesome to see lots more great Microsolidarity folk there. And feel free to reach out in case of any comments or questions.
Woohoo! Thank you, Sarah. Super. And Julia, do you want to do any announcement about the newsletter?
Yes, I put out a newsletter by email. So for people who don't maybe come to the are not in Telegram groups and don't come to the calls, but are in kind of the wider network. So it's a good way to get the word out. And I've put a link in the chat, but I'll do it again. And there's a Google form, and it's basically for anything Microsolidarity related. So this can be an event, or this can be some kind of piece of content, your reflections on things, your interviews, any kind of media, things like that. And there is a simple Google form to drop your links, and then I put them all together and send them out early next week.
Woohoo! Yeah, it's such a rich newsletter. I really love that we have that. If people are not registered for it, how can they sign up? Julia, do you have a link for that as well?
Oh yes, good point. I'll just give me a second and I'll do that.
Great, thanks so much. And yeah, I wonder, Shane, do you want to share something about this event that you're going to be doing at Elkenmist soon? It sounds really exciting.
Yeah, well, this is Stephen and I actually, and thank you for putting it out there. Yeah, I saw you threw in the chat a little while ago a reference to that, and I haven't gotten around to adding it to the Google Doc, but I want to do that for the Microsolidarity sort of Google Doc newsletter thing. Yeah, this is Stephen and I. We're hosting this thing called Cascade Camp, and it's going to be a part of this organization, or it's run by this organization that we're also co-creating and launching, called Rhizomia, which is doing regional meetups here in the Pacific Northwest. Seasonally is the plan, roughly every 3 months, give or take, for people who want to host events and start things. So it's like we're hosting the hosters. We're trying to get something going here on a larger scale. And the goal is people aren't just meeting at these events and then they go to this event and they go home and then they come to the next event a few months later. we're wanting to like really encourage people to start things when they come to these and to build a community that lasts and grows and strengthens between the events and grows over time. And yeah, so using micro-solidarity premises and some of the, like, again, some of the models specifically, but also the feeling of going to the summer camp gave me a much higher resolution and deeply felt sense of, okay, what is this going to feel like? What would be good for this to feel like? And yeah, you can check this out. The event coming up in August is called Cascade Camp, and the organization is called Rhizomia, and I will put details in the Google Doc. And thank you again for the invitation to do that. I really appreciate it. Oh, and it's August 16th through 18th of this coming month. Those are the dates.
Amazing. That sounds just so aligned. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Really exciting. Cool. Anything else people want to drop in sort of related to Microsolidarity that's coming up? All right. Then I just want to do a last shout out of my own announcement, which is that I'm hosting this call today, but I'm also really excited about other people using this seat that I'm in to practice facilitation. So if you want to host one of the network calls, I'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email at microsolidarity, it's right in the chat, at gmail.com. It helps if you've been on one of these calls already. So if you're listening to the recording and you haven't been, maybe come to one first. And it also is often really great to co-host it. So I can either co-host it with you, or you could find someone else who's been to the calls to do that together. And it can be anything like what we're doing today, just inviting some sharings and question and answer, getting people to share what they're doing, because I hear a lot that people are like, what's going on? I want to hear what people are learning. Or it could be a practice, a connecting practice that generates a sense of belonging that you'd like to share and try out. Or it could be like hosting a peer coaching or peer support session like Troika or Case Clinic, just to give you a sprinkling of ideas. And I'm there to support you as much as you like. And yeah, if you want to use it as a practice, I also would encourage you at the end you can create some time to get some feedback, like how was my facilitation, what worked well, because this is really all about, as we mentioned, research and growing together, and how do we host these wholesome spaces for belonging, connection, and mutual support. So yeah, please do get in touch, and I'd love to hear from you there. Yeah, maybe as a little checkout, let's hear from everyone how, like, 2 or 3 words, how are you leaving the call today? And whoever wants to start can pop and just pass it on to the next person by naming their name out loud. If you want to unmute yourself, you will. Yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah. Anyone want to start us off?
I'm feeling perky and tired. I'm going to hand to Julia.
I'm feeling warmed up and joyful. And I'll pass on to Kevin.
I'm feeling distracted and insightful. Last to Rui.
Thank you. I am feeling very curious. Yeah, very curious, and also relaxed. And I'll pass it to Marine.
I feel full because I ate while listening to you lovely people. Now I'll pass it to you, Anne.
I feel thankful and bubbly. Victor.
Thanks, Well. I'm feeling, grateful and relaxed and ready to start my day. I will hand over to Valentina.
I'm feeling a little bit unfocused, but also excited about the future events that will happen. And I will pass it on to Stephen.
I'm feeling alert, or maybe woken up, and a little bit anxious. I've got some stuff coming up, so that's weighing on my mind, but it's been good. And I'll pass it on to Shane.
I'm feeling calm and excited. And I think we've done the run. Do I pass it back to Jocelyn? I think we did everybody.
Yep. I'll take it back. And then just share. I'm feeling really connected and stimulated in a very positive way. Yeah. Just really in love with this network and this group and everyone who's doing the thing, and it's just great. So let's unmute ourselves. Feel free to do that, and we'll wave each other goodbye and sign off.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh.
Bye.